life is lived more in the everyday. So what's something I can do today to help? Can I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for? In between meetings, do I get up and go outside and walk around the block? Do I, instead of just picking up my phone or going back to the email, do I just sit at my desk, close my eyes, and take deep breaths for 2 minutes? What are some of those things we can do at small amounts of time? Go outside and get 5 minutes of sunlight on your forehead. We don't have a pill that's better for us than that, and I don't suspect that we're going to. So what are those little things that we can do? So yeah, I love that. Big is great, but big is less common.
If we're being very generalist, we can believe the concept that work makes us burnt out or work gets us stressed. But I believe that it's when we don't have purpose, that when we're not living in alignment, that's when it happens. And it's not necessarily the work or the stress. And that I could be wrong, because I am someone that loves to work. I'm someone that thrives under the right kind of stress. I can have challenges that seem tiny and I can be tearing my hair out going, oh my God, I need a holiday, I need a break, I can't do this anymore. Can you speak a little bit to that? Welcome to today's episode of Influence by Design. I'm your host, Samantha Riley, and today we're going to talk about winning in life. I'm going to leave that to our guest to explain what we're talking about specifically. We're going to talk about the opposite of that. We're going to talk about burnout. You may be feeling that right now, that you want a little bit more inspiration to get into your day, have some more energy. We're going to talk about all of that. So Eric, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me, Samantha. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off. I'd love to know, before we dive into any of the actual content, why do you do what you do?
Well, that is a great question. I do what I do because I want to make an impact on people. That's really why I get up in the morning. I have a story that I believe is significant and powerful. And I just know that someday, if I'm on my deathbed and I have not shared this story, and I have not done everything that I can in my life to help leave the world better than when I got here, that I'm going to regret that. And so that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, the possibility to help somebody, help a lot of people. Trust that this is the way it's going to happen.
I love that, because I think that if we're being very generalist, we can get into or we can believe the concept that work makes us burnt out or work gets us stressed. But I believe that it's when we don't have purpose, that when we're not living in alignment, that's when it happens. And it's not necessarily the work or the stress. And that I could be wrong, because I am someone that loves to work. I'm someone that thrives under the right kind of stress. I love having a big project and a big challenge if I know that it's going in the right direction, and I feel fueled by that. And yet sometimes I can work a fifth of the amount of hours. I can have challenges that seem tiny and I can be tearing my hair out going, oh my God, I need a holiday, I need a break, I can't do this anymore. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, I'm sure glad to hear that I'm not the only one who has that. I like to call that flow, when we are in the zone, when we are feeling our purpose, when we're doing purposeful work, when we're doing those things. Those are the days that I feel like I could be at my desk, writing, creating content, whatever I'm doing, and I wouldn't need an end to the day. I would just keep going, keep me fed, keep my blood sugar up, and just let me keep going because it feels so good. But other times there's these weird speed bumps that we hit that just take us down. And it's, I call those death by paper cut. So we have those times when, so you know what a paper cut feels like, right?
Yeah.
It's so small, but it just really annoys us. Well, and paper cuts do this weird thing. You get one, then you get another, and then you get another. And there actually was it's in medieval times, there was a way of execution called death by 1,000 cuts. And so they would just slowly cut you up, which is unbelievably barbaric. But we have these times in our lives where we get a little paper cut, we get another cut, we get another cut, and all of a sudden we just feel like we're bleeding. We're really struggling with that. And that can really happen when we're working outside of our purpose, or when we're letting those little paper cuts really get to us.
Mm. Now, you're actually a dentist by trade, and you still have your practice. Can you talk about the transition of how you even moved into this coaching and mentoring space? Because you still have your practice, right?
I do. I do. Yeah, I didn't know the term burnout, but I was the textbook case of burnout. I could spend a whole hour talking about my bullying story when I was growing up, but I'm from a small town in Iowa in the US. And in the early 80s, on the recess field, kickball was life. The sport of kickball was life. And getting to play kickball, that's the only thing I wanted to do. I wanted to get to recess so I could play kickball. The thing was, there was a point when it was determined that I was not good enough to play kickball. This is second and third grade. And when you hear, Eric, you don't need to play, you're not good enough. I would have been fine being picked last because I still could have got that kick that everybody would have believed in me. But I remember as a third grader, standing on the side of that recess field, making a pact with myself that said, I am going to be so freaking good at everything I ever do that no one will ever not pick me. Now, I didn't realize the power of those words until probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But everything I did, I was convinced that it wasn't good enough. So I kept striving harder and harder. I had to be the best in high school, the best in dental school. Then I started running, and a 5K wasn't enough, a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon wasn't enough. I started in triathlon all the way through the Ironman distance. And it finally was on the top of a hill, a mountain called Mount Princeton in Colorado, a 14,000-foot peak that I had hiked. And I got to the top and I looked around and it hit me like a ton of bricks. If you don't know why you're climbing the mountain, you're not going to find the answer at the top. And I just thought, oh man, I have been chasing this good enough and I'm never going to get there. So what I really had to do is I had come back down from that mountain and start to realize, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because burnout had a massive hold of me. You can imagine striving all of that, trying to run a dental practice with 20 people, all these different things. I was suffering from panic attacks. I had chest pain. I had heart palpitations. I had a head that literally would not quit spinning. I would have Sunday nights that I was so terrified to go to work the next day that I would not sleep the entire night. And then I would work a day, and it just stacked on top of itself. So that's kind of where I finally realized that I was so burned out, because I realized I wanted to escape. I wanted to get away. I wanted to sell my practice. And I thought for a season that was going to be the answer.
I'd love you to share the story that you shared with me just before we started recording around that, because I think it's so powerful to help us all. Like, we all know that there is a greater something out there, whether it's God, whether it's our, spirituality, like whatever it is, whether it's the universe. But there was someone definitely looking after you during that time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, faith is a huge thing. It was definitely my interpretation of it is it was God watching over me. But here's the reality of it. This was post-COVID. So during COVID is when I started thinking, I had discretionary time. I hadn't had that for so long. And there was this whole thing where my dental practice was closed. And so there's a million webinars to watch about infection control and about new procedures and how we're going to reopen and all of that kind of stuff. And my head was spinning like it never had before. So that's when the thought of starting to do some speaking is kind of how it started out. I started writing, I started doing some stuff like that just to help kind of relieve the stress. And when we came back from COVID, I had a conversation with my partner or my associate at the time, another dentist who worked for me. And I said, hey, look, are you interested in buying the practice? And he said, yeah, I'm interested in buying the practice. That'd be great. I said, well, here's the thing. I think I'm going to walk away. And he said, okay, yeah, I'm very interested in buying. So we had figured out a time in February of 2021 when the practice management consultant was going to come and work out the final details with him. I would sell, I would be there for probably about 6 months, and then I would walk away. To what I was going to do after that, heck if I know, but I was so burned out, and I felt like the only way out was to escape from the practice. And so things were clicking along. January 18th of 2021 is a Monday morning. We met for our 7:45 morning huddle before we get started for the day. And one person was not in the huddle. And I asked his assistant, I said, hey, where's he at? Have you seen him? No, I haven't seen him yet. Yeah, we'll call him. Call went right to voicemail, called his wife. She had no idea where he was.
Mm.
And then we heard sirens. And not even a mile from our office, he was in a horrific car accident. The EMT said it's a miracle that he survived. He did survive. But what I realized after that was that kind of moment of clarity for me that this was not the right idea. He was not the right person to sell it to, and it was not the right time to sell it. And I am so thankful. I'm not thankful he was in a car accident. That was an
No,
awful
not at
thing.
all.
But we have these bad things that happen in our lives, and sometimes they get redeemed to a place that we couldn't have imagined where they went to. So I had to step back and say, what is it that I really want? I realized that I was trying to go around the burnout. And so often in our lives, we try to go around the problems. I'm sure there's a ton of coaches who are listening to this who are like, oh yeah, I help people with this all the time. They're not facing the real problem. And I wasn't facing the real problem. So I figured out what was it that I actually wanted to do. Well, I still actually wanted to have a relationship with my team and with my dental patients and all of that, but I also wanted to impact people in a different way. So I thought, okay, how can I do this? So I was able to find a partner to come into my dental practice. He bought half of my practice. We're 50-50 partners. And I told him from day one, here's the thing, I'm going to stay around for a couple months, and then I'm going to reduce my schedule to 3 days a week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm in my dental practice doing what I love to do, the parts that I love to do about it. And then on the other days, I'm doing some coaching, I'm doing keynote speaking, workshops, writing, things like that. So this is a space that I couldn't have imagined. I thought it had to be an either or. So I'm so thankful that I didn't sell my practice because I wouldn't have been able to come back from that. And it's a great space to be right now.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that story. I mean, in the matter of half an hour, I've heard that twice and like goosebumps hit listening to that story. There are two very big pieces that stood out to me in that. And one of them, and you mentioned it and glossed over it so quickly, but it's the power of the pause. It is amazing what happens when we actually stop and just sit in it. And I had a very similar experience to you where I remember being in this time where a lot of things were going really wrong in my business. And I remember ringing my brother, who it's so bizarre that these things happen because I hadn't spoken to him for like years and years and years. And he was we used to text. I never picked up the phone and talked to him, but this particular night, I just have had this pull to pick up the phone and talk to him. And at the time, he was tour guiding out in Central Australia, like right in the middle of the Australian outback, which even, most people around the world are like, wow, that must be amazing. Even most Australians haven't been out there. It's just, it's so vast and miles away. And he's like, why don't you just jump on a plane and come visit? He's like, I'm not on a tour. Why don't you just come and visit? And I sat there on the bed and I can still picture it. And I like looked up flights and I went, there's a flight tomorrow. And I was there by lunchtime the next day. And he took me on a hike to the West MacDonnell Ranges, which are, I believe, like one of the biggest mountain ranges in the world. I didn't even know this existed in the outback. I thought there was just nothing but desert. But they have this most amazing set of ranges, and we set off at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to the top because it was super, super hot out there. Took us, I think something like 8 hours. It was an 8 hour hike, but I remember getting to the top of, I think it was Count Point, and just looking out, and this range is so massive. And I remember this is my moment of change where I stood up there. I went, huh, my problems aren't really that big because right up here, I feel so insignificant. Like the landscape was so vast that it was such a turning point for me to go, I'm just a speck on this planet and we can work it out. And for me, like you, I had this moment, but if we didn't take the pause, we would never have been able to work through that. So I find that so amazing. The second piece that I picked up from what you were talking about was love. You went in and just went, this is what I love to do. And this is what I love to do. I'm going to take the best bits about this side and the best bits about this side, and I'm going to put them together and create this amazing life. I think that they're two really, really important points. My question is, what was it that gave you the permission, like the self permission, to say to yourself, I'm going to do what I love to do?
Whoa, I love that. Um, I want to go back just a little bit. I'm going to
Yeah,
hit this.
go. Like, let's go.
No, oh man, I think we could talk for like 3 hours. This is
Oh,
amazing.
100%.
Um, but the power of the pause, I love to talk to people about that. And actually, I get to talk to a group of seventh and eighth grade students. So
Oh, how
13,
special.
14-year-old leaders, their teacher asked if I'd come in and do a little bit of a time with them. And I said, how would you guys like a free superpower today? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, what does everybody like for a superpower? And, some are like, invisible. I want to fly. I want a superhuman strength, all that kind of stuff. And I said, what if you had a superpower that would get you in trouble with your parents less? What if you had a superpower that would help you make bad choices less? What if you had a superpower that would help you to just have better thoughts? And they're all raising their hand. Yeah, 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 yeah. This is not very exciting, but it's called the pause. How many times your parents said something, you get mad and you go right back to them, right? You just snap right back at them. What if you just took one deep breath and then you responded instead of snapping back at them? Oh, yeah. And so we talked about that a little bit. And I think it's something we need to be reminded of a lot of the times, because when we get burned out, we're very reactive. We're very snappy. We're very
Yeah.
chippy. That pause is such a gift, whether it's a momentary pause, because we don't pause anymore, right? We have
Mm.
self-checkout. We don't have to wait in checkout lanes anymore. And if we do, we pick our phones up. We don't, when we used to be, we would pause at traffic lights and just look around a little bit. Now we pick up our phones. We've lost those moments of pause. So I love that you brought that up. I also love that you brought that up about just that feeling of insignificance on the top of the dot on the top of a mountain. I took a good friend up. I'm also a pilot. I took a good friend up in the plane, and we were flying over our hometown, and he was talking about the things that he's interested in, and I said, hey, let's fly over the place where you work and let's fly over your home. And so we flew over those. I said, there's one dot that's important to you. And there's the other dot that's important to you. And then we flew over a little bit higher. This is see how small those dots are? And we are flying over one small part of one state out of 50 in the US, one country out of how many? And we think our problems are so big.
Yes.
Yes. But the reality is there's lots of people, lots of dots, and somehow it's all interconnected and there's a way that it all works out. So it's just a good reminder that yes, our momentary problems, that they're a big deal to us, but to try to pause and not get so fired up about them. Just take a moment, step back and say, okay, what can we do about this? So brought that up.
Because it
So
doesn't
now,
necessarily, I just want to dive into that just before we move on. It doesn't
yeah,
necessarily need to be going and walking to a top of a mountain like you and I did. It can be as simple as, and I say this to my clients all the time, your meditation or your version of a meditation could be just as simple as I'm having a bad day. I'm just going to go make a cup of tea and go sit outside under the, in the backyard with a cup of tea and sit in the sun. It can be that simple. It doesn't need to be something huge. And, having that time or just, at the end of a call, just walking away and, going for a walk. It can be super simple.
absolutely. I love what I call, these are like micro recovery things that I talk about. So yes, a trip to the Outback, amazing. How often are you going to get to do that? Very often, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not an every week thing, right?
For sure. And so we put so much pressure on our vacations. We're so wiped out. We coast into our vacations on fumes, right? And then it takes us 5 days to get uncorked to be able to even enjoy that 7-day vacation. And how many of those do we get a year? Maybe a couple, maybe 3. Life is lived more in the everyday. So what's something I can do today to help? Can I write down 5 things that I'm grateful for? In between meetings, do I get up and go outside and walk around the block? Do I, instead of just picking up my phone or going back to the email, do I just sit at my desk, close my eyes, and take deep breaths for 2 minutes? What are some of those things we can do in small amounts of time? Go outside and get 5 minutes of sunlight on your forehead. We don't have a pill that's better for us than that. And I don't suspect that we're going to. So what are those little things that we can do? So yeah, I love that. Big is great, but big is less common for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, totally. Thanks for going down that rabbit hole with me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
My original question that both of us have not even got to yet, the love, like how did you get to the point where you gave yourself permission to say, I love doing this and I love doing this, and this is how I'm going to put it all together?
Yeah. Most of my life, I will say I have not loved myself. I haven't. And when you think you're not good enough, it's hard to love something that's not good enough. And it's not like it wasn't modeled well for me. I have amazing parents. They love me really well. My wife is amazing. My kids are amazing. But I didn't love myself. And so I knew when that happened, and it wasn't a switch that flipped, and all of a sudden I went from not loving myself to loving myself. What really happened in that moment when I found out the practice sale wasn't going to happen is a 3-dentist practice became a 2-dentist practice, and we were running around like chickens with our heads cut off. I mean, it was crazy. I wouldn't wish that on anybody else, but I had no choice but to spend as much time in recovery as possible. My days were so stressful, so intense, that I could not have as many things on my plate outside of work as I normally did. I had to come home and rest because I just didn't have anything. And it was really in those moments of quiet that I thought, okay, why are you pushing so hard? What are you going to end up with? You're going to end up with money, but no enjoyment. You're going to end up with a great retirement plan and probably a heart attack. There's just some of these things that have got to change. And so I started seeing some of these systems that I had in place that weren't working. I had some old operating systems that were crap. They needed to be reworked. And so I really had to slow down to figure that out. My wife is a great question asker. She said, "Hey, so this isn't going to work out now. What do you want? What do you want life to look like?" And we started having some of those conversations. And I realized that, I wanted a life where I had time for her, where I had time for my kids. And I hadn't had that. I would be at the office at 6:30 in the morning. A lot of nights I wouldn't come home till 6. I'd be shot. I wouldn't be bringing the best version of myself home. And I just said, I can't do that anymore. I can't do that. It's not fair to my family. It's not fair to me. Boy, if I have a heart attack in my 50s and that's the end of my life, what is there to show other than somebody who everybody will say, I don't know how he did it. He worked so hard. So I just realized that that is not what I wanted. And I also realized one of the biggest causes of burnout is that we haven't figured out what we love about our jobs. And even if we do, we haven't leveraged that part of our job as much as possible so we can have more enjoyment. I found out for me, my dental practice, I love my patients. I love my team. I do. The technical aspects and some of the practice management stuff, I don't particularly care for that. But I love my patients. So I take time and have conversations with my patients. I take time and have conversations with my team. That's the part that gives me energy. So what I encourage people, whatever it is about your job, figure out what it is you like and then do as much of that as possible. And if you ultimately say there is nothing I like about my job, then can I say it's time to find a new job?
The people that I speak to, I actually never hear that anymore. Truthfully, never hear that in my world. What I do hear though is I just want to do this part. And it's usually, I want to create trainings, or I want to write, or I want to just coach, or, I want to do the things that I love to do. And it's generally those sort of things. But then there's always the second part of the sentence that goes, but I don't know how to get rid of that, or but I think I should be doing it, or but I can't afford someone else to do it. And there's a but and some sort of story. How did you get past that story? And I'm not saying that, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not saying it to minimize that those things aren't real. But I think that there has to be a point where we realize that it is just a story, that we are filled with resourcefulness, and we actually can move through these situations. And yeah, so how did you do that? Like what did you need to tap into? What resources did you need to tap into to move through that?
Yeah, so initially I thought I'm just going to quit my practice. I'm going to coach and speak and write. That's what I'm going to do.
The
Well,
fun stuff.
great. Yeah. I mean, that's great, but that's not practical. You're not going to be a stage speaker day one. You're not going to be a famous writer day one. And I looked at these other people and I got in this comparison thing. And comparison is the thief of joy. It definitely is. I think Teddy Roosevelt said that. And we spend so much time comparing people. Well, I can't compare myself to a 15-year seasoned speaker. They've done all the hard stuff. And some of that, well, I don't want to do this. I only want to do the fun stuff. Well, I do too. But you know what? If you want to do more of the fun stuff, you got to do the hard stuff until you can get there. You either have to do the hard stuff until you can afford to pay somebody to do the hard stuff for you, or you need to figure out another way to do it. You need to get more efficient with doing the hard stuff, because for me, most of the time, it's just me. And so I'm doing proposals. I'm doing all of those kind of things. Some of those things I'd love to not do, but at the point where I'm at, I have my wife do some things for me, and I have a virtual assistant do just a couple things for me. But really, we look at life, you either do what you really love to do, and that's great, but it does have to pay your bills as well, or you do something else that pays the bills so you can do what you really love to do. Those are tough things to get around. Those are tough realities to get around. And if you really want to do the fun stuff all the time, then learn to hustle. That's what we have to do. Hard work, learn your craft, learn from people who have been there before you. I mean, the content that's available right now, it's unbelievable. You want to learn how to do something, you can almost certainly figure out how to do it for free somewhere on the internet if you know how to find it. Hire a coach, hire somebody who's been there before you and wants to do and is doing what you want to do. Borrow from them. It's not necessarily going to be a light switch. Even when I decided to join with a partner, that was in May that we started talking about that. He didn't come on board till December. I still had another 7 months of really intense hard work that I was not enjoying. But I knew that if I did that, that is what was ahead.
I think there's also, as you were talking, I had this feeling like there's almost two camps of hard stuff. There's the hard stuff that we just hate, and it doesn't matter how much we do it. We will continue to hate it for as long as possible. For me, that is doing my accounts. I cannot stand it. I've been in business over 30 years and I still do not love it. But then there's the other side of the hard stuff, and it might be something that I've never done before, or it's a challenge, or it's a big project. And I start off finding it really hard because I've never done it before. But as I push through and as I get to the other side, it actually builds my confidence. It makes me feel excited. And I have this feeling like, oh my goodness, I feel so good about myself. I did that. And I feel like sometimes we do need to get through, well, we need to get through all of it. We have to do our accounts, let's face it. But, you know, on the other side, some of that seemingly at the beginning stuff that we thought was hard maybe doesn't feel so hard on the other side.
Yeah, that's so true. What we tend to do, at least I have tended to do this in the past, is I have this thing in front of me and it looks like a mountain. It looks like a big, ugly mountain. And all I'm doing is looking up at the top of that mountain and saying, I'm never going to get there. But no one ever goes just from the base of the mountain to the summit. You have to climb the mountain to get to the summit. So I talk to people about, all right, you're not on the mountain right now, and that mountain looks really big and really ugly. What do you do to take that first step onto the mountain? Okay, wow, awesome. You did that step. You followed through with it. You won't have to do that step again. Okay, what's the next step? The next step. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro several years ago, and it took us 5 days to get up there and then 2 days to get back down. We did not do it in one day. We did not do it. We had to just put one foot in front of the other. And so I think we just look at those mountains and I don't want to do that. That's an ugly mountain. That's a nasty mountain. That's not going to go well. You don't know that. You have to start.
What mental resources did you need to tap into to walk Mount Kilimanjaro? Because that's something that I have no, I actually couldn't think of anything worse personally, but wow, like that must have been amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah. So I've never had a problem with motivation and training. I've done 2 Ironman triathlons, so I'm used to doing the work. What was interesting is that I live in Iowa, which is about 800 feet above sea level. Mount Kilimanjaro is 19,341 at the top.
Oh,
And so I had to
yeah.
train at sea level. So I got one of these training masks and altitude simulation masks. So you put it on and you put different ports on, and it simulated 18,000 feet. And I would do everything with that. I would go on 20-mile hikes with that mask on. I would ride my bike with that mask on. I would do everything I could to simulate that high altitude. So when it was ready to be on the mountain, I was ready for it. I was in great shape. It was difficult, but more the difficult part of it was it was hard to sleep on the mountain. It was hard to do some of those kind of things. But the
Ah,
technical aspects, uh, as far as hiking the mountain, because I had put the work in, I was ready for it.
mm. Well, there's the metaphor right there.
Yep.
Let's talk about the dam analogy. This is something that you've written about. Can you explain what the dam analogy is?
Yeah. So the elevator version of it is that we are all like a dam. So basically what a dam does, there's a lake on one side, and there's a river that flows out on the other side. All we are really doing is controlling the flow of energy that goes through our bodies. So we have a reserve, and then we have an outflow. What I find with people is that we're pretty good about the outflow. We get stuff done. We get our things taken care of. What we're not so good at is the inflow. We're not very good at taking care of ourselves. We let ourselves get empty, and then we get burned out, reactive, all of those kinds of things. We hit snags on the bottom of the lake. We make poor decisions. So the dam analogy is basically about what strategies can we do to make sure that our outflow is what we want it to be, being in our sweet spot, being in our why, and then strategies to refill so that we have something to share with the world.
Mm. A lot of people talk about self-care and, go and have a massage or take a vacation. What is something that you can share today for the person that's listening that says, well, that's fine, but I can't take a vacation tomorrow. I don't like massages. What is something that you can share for the normal everyday person that is something that is achievable for the overworker?
Yeah. So I talk about, and this goes back to the pause. It really does. It goes back to what are those small things that we can do in our lives to fill us back up. There are maybe people listening to this who are single parents and they have all kinds of stuff with their kids. They're constantly bombarded by their kids or their work. There's people who are busy with their jobs. They have appointments all day, all kinds of things. Well, where are the moments in your day that you can have a little bit of recovery? You do have time. I would argue with almost anyone who says, I don't have any time. If they push with that, I would say, let's take a look at your screen time. Because what we've done is we've traded all our pause and recovery moments for distraction. And that distraction is not helping us. I know that listening to a podcast is a great thing. But if all you ever do is work and listen to podcasts, you haven't given your brain time to relax. So maybe you're driving to work and you usually listen to music. What if you turned the music off and you were just present in the moment? You looked around, you took some deep breaths, you kind of let your mind just rest for a little bit. Our minds crave that time. So what
Mm.
if you have a day full of meetings and you only have 5 minutes in between the meetings? What if instead of going and checking your email or spending time on your phone, what if you just walked a couple flights of stairs in your building? What if you walked around the block outside? What if you opened the window and just breathed in some fresh air for a little bit? What if you got some sun on your forehead? Because this is the reality, like we were talking about earlier. Big vacations, big recovery times are great, but we're not going to have as many of those times. And even somebody who has a crazy, crazy schedule, I bet you could find 15 minutes to read a book and let yourself relax one time a day. I bet before you go to bed, you could write down 5 things that you're grateful for, or write down a couple wins from the day and then a couple priorities from tomorrow. I bet if your head is really spinning, you have 10 minutes that you could do a brain dump and just get it all out of there and then be ready for whatever's next. So that's one of the things that I love to talk about. Not everybody likes a massage. Other people's hands on them, that creeps some people out. Um,
Totally.
and and the thing that's tough about this is it's so individualized. People will should other people to death. You should do this. You should do this. You should do this. I don't like that. Okay, what are the things that help fill you back up And even in the small moments, how can you do those things?
I love that so much. I think the way you've spoken about that is something that I truly believe in, and it's something that I don't hear often. You were talking about not picking up your phone. About a month ago, I noticed that I was starting to get a little bit anxious when I was on social media. So, my husband and I go out for coffee most days, and we go out for breakfast once a week on our way home from our personal training session, and we go out for a dinner date once a week. What I was noticing in those times was when he was ordering coffee, like he's amazing. He does all the ordering. When he was ordering coffee or when he was up at the counter ordering our breakfast, the first thing I'd do was pick up my phone and sit at the table with my phone. I set myself a goal about a month ago when I realized I was starting to get this anxiety to not pick up my phone when he goes and orders. Do you know what? Just sitting there while he's at the counter ordering our coffee, and I just sit at the table, and sometimes I stare out into space, and sometimes I look around me. Sometimes I actually have conversations with people around me because I'm a bit of a chatty person. It feels so much better. And it is such a simple pause. It is such a simple pause, just not picking up your phone. So I love that you mentioned that.
We have become afraid of quiet spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We get anxious. We don't have our phone. We feel like we're going to miss something out. Somebody's going to post something on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, and that's going to be the thing, and we're going to miss it. I have started asking myself, why am I picking this up? I just ask that question because we all have our phone routine, right? You pick it up and you check Facebook and then Instagram and then LinkedIn and then the weather, and you check the news and you check this website, you check your scores and all this kind of stuff. You get done with all that stuff. Oh man, I probably missed something. Better go around the horn again and check all those things again. Well, you probably wasted an hour, or you probably used an hour. I'm not going to say it's all wasted,
Mm.
but what if instead you said, why am I picking this up? And all you're really doing to pick it up is you're going through that routine, and you're going to make yourself more anxious. If I don't have a good reason to pick up my phone, I'm not picking up my phone. It has made an unbelievable difference for me for anxiety, because I struggled with it significantly. And I know that when it starts to tick back up, I can usually check my screen time and there's a pretty good correlation.
Mm, perfect. And in all of that, I'm not saying that I don't love technology. I do. I do love social media because I've actually been blessed to connect with people all over the world, and some who have turned into really, really close friends. So definitely don't have an aversion to social media and technology. It's just that sometimes it's nice just to not have it and just to breathe and pretend I'm back in the 80s where there is no phones and there isn't someone emailing me going, we need this stat. So I 100% agree with it. For people that have listened to this conversation and they're like, you know what, I need to implement some of these practices in my day, or I love the way that this conversation has gone, or this has sort of triggered a thought within me. How can people connect with you, and how can they get a copy of your book?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon. Pretty easy to find it. The best place to find me is my website. It's just ericrecker.com, and there's lots of different resources on there. I believe in giving some things away for free. So there's a free 5-day knockback burnout challenge. I'm proud of that. I think it's a good way to kind of start and raise your hand and say I might be struggling with this a little bit. And there's also a 5 principles of win the now, and it's just 5 ways that I use to try to be more in the present moment. So those are 2 resources that are free. I'd love to have you grab those. It also helps us be able to stay in touch going forward. So, and there's also a link to set up a strategy session with me if you're just kind of feeling stuck and you want somebody to talk about it with. I'm more than happy to have a conversation.
Love that. So we'll put those links below. We'll put the Amazon link for the book, The Damn Analogy. We'll pop the link for the website below, wherever you're listening to this. But Eric, just to wrap this up, What is one thing that you want to leave people with today? What's that one thing that you want them to walk away and go, yeah.
Well, I will say my equation for burnout, that every time I've experienced burnout in my life, and it's been multiple times, is that I was overcommitted and I was not taking care of myself. That is, I've looked at it, I've picked it apart, I've tried to do research on it, and for me, that's what it was. So I think we have to take a look at the things we're committed to. A lot of those things might be our phone, Netflix, different stuff like that. They're internal and external. The things that do not meet with our why, we have to assess, are those important to be in our life or are they not? And then we have to take care of ourselves, especially in those little day-to-day ways. Because if we don't, burnout's coming.
Mm. Love it so much. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for coming and riffing with me, sharing this conversation. I think for business owners, it's a really, really important conversation. Probably one of the most important conversations we can have, because as businesses, we run the economy, and we need to be there, and we need to be fully, in what we're doing so that we can make the money. But at the same time, we've got this one life, and every single day is ticking by. We're spending another day. So thank you so much for bringing this conversation today.
Thanks for having me. This has been fantastic.